get started. I have a script which I'm going to find here. Right. As a preliminary matter, this is the Nantucket Historical Commission. Permit me to confirm that all members in person anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. I've just confirmed that. And Holly, can you just confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay, and
Yes.
I'm going to call your name members. Clement?
Here.
Okay, David?
Here.
Angus?
Here.
Nikki?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Great, and we have some members of our resource advisors here as well. Okay, good morning. This open meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID, we've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a highly accessible physical location. Furthermore, public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which is posted with the agenda materials, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded. So the public can follow along. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless it's required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Historical Commission is convening by Zoom, as posted on the town website, identifying how the public may join. For Zoom meetings, note that the meeting is being recorded. All attendees are participating by video conference. Please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast will be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided are available on the town website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're turning to the first item. Permit me to cover some ground rules. I will introduce each speaker. After they conclude their remarks, I'll go down the line of members, inviting everyone to comment, make questions or motions. Hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If you wish to engage in a conversation with other members, do so through me, taking care to identify yourself. After everyone has spoken, I will afford public comment to members of the public that have joined the meeting by Zoom. If you wish to speak, you have to state your name and be acknowledged and speak through the chair. Each vote will be conducted by roll call. Okay, so we are having an abbreviated meeting today. We're going to be dealing with a couple orders of business and then go over some work that we put together to advise the DPW about historicals for streets. And then we have just a couple other items, and we do have a member of the public here to talk about one of those items. So I have just a few quick announcements that I just like to go through to make everybody aware of some things. We're not going to discuss them, but we might discuss them at a future meeting. The first announcement is that the select board did approve a route for the new sewer force main. It is going to go through town and then out by the high school. It will be using federal funds, so there will be an opportunity for Section 106 review. They have hired an archaeology consultant, public archaeology laboratory, to advise them. And we will also have an opportunity to comment. Streets and will be dug up, so we'll have an opportunity to put our guidelines that we're going to go through today to work. Generally on archaeology, this is something that I've started just making some inquiries about, with the idea that we might have a meeting in the future that's all about archaeology. Street signs. So a lot of the signs have gone up on Milestone Road. I'm sure everybody's seen them. I'm just sort of noting that that's happened, and it does just make me aware of how important it is that we get ahead of projects and comment in a timely manner if we expect our comments to be acted on, because things really move ahead and there's a point of no return with public projects. I want everybody to know that I've been notified by our town manager that October 7th, we will have the opportunity to go back in front of the select board to talk about our application to be a certified local government. I haven't gotten any more details and it hasn't been confirmed, but please hold that date of October 7th for a select board meeting. I'm going to be addressing the town association, part of this chapter of the Civic League today at 4 p.m. If anyone's part of the town association wants to join, I just wanted you to know that. And included in the packet is the schedule for town meeting with all of the dates. So we're not gonna have a lot of time to talk about that today, but it's, you know, talking about schedules and doing things in a timely manner so that our input can be heard. That's something to study, and it'll be on our agenda for our next meeting. Does anybody else have any other announcements? Okay, seeing none. New business. So included in the packet, Holly, maybe you could put it up on the screen, is a proposal to install a monument to Arthur Cooper at Angola Street. This is a letter that I've drafted after working over the past couple months with Fran Kertunen and a resident of Angola Street named Maureen Searle. Maureen would like to donate a plaque to commemorate this quite remarkable and notable event, which was the protection of Arthur Cooper, who had escaped from slavery in Virginia and was sheltered in the Gardner's home until a marshal who'd come to return him to slavery finally gave up and left the island. There's some text, and this would be a project that we would move forward with the land bank because the proposal would be that it would be installed on land bank land, and it would be a gift from Maureen Searle, so the town would need to accept the gift. I have talked with Jessie Bell, and she invited me to draft this letter and propose it to the land bank so that they could take it up at one of their meetings. So I just wanted to hear comments about this and take a vote, or have any comments about changing the letter. Holly is our staff person. Do you have any comment? Okay, David? I can't hear you, David.
Sorry, what were you asking?
I'm just wanting it to go. I'm going to go through all of you because of Zoom. You know, I want to ask all of you if you have any comments on this letter or the project or the initiative or anything. David?
No, I think it's great.
Okay, Tom?
Great too. I think you ought to submit it as written.
Okay, Clement?
Sorry, I missed the question. Can you just leave me out of this one? I'm sorry.
Sure, okay. Angus?
I think it's a great idea, and I like it as it's written.
Okay, Mickey?
I think it looks great.
Georgia?
I like the text a lot. It's quite a large plaque. Where exactly are they planning to put this? On what?
So the idea would be that it would go on a boulder. I have the dimensions because we've identified a fabricator and he did a quick layout. But you know, this isn't the first time we'll see this. We will approve any final design. And indeed, the donor might ask to condense it, but this is what she's said that she's happy with, and Fran.
I had read about this. I had read about this story, so I'm happy to have it memorialized like this. Great idea.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to make any comment about this project, or?
Hi.
Yes. Mary?
I think it's a great project. I just have a few recommended changes to the text, which would be, and it's just going off of, there's been a push away, especially at the Park Service level, in changing language where slavery is the condition and instead of free. So I would say changing something like escape from slavery into Arthur Cooper was an enslaved man seeking freedom who moved to Nantucket, or changing escape from slavery to Arthur Cooper was a freedom seeker who moved to Nantucket. It's just a thought. And then master, changing master to slaveholder.
Okay,
Can I say something?
who's that?
It's me, Georgia. I
Georgia,
agree.
yes.
Yeah, I agree completely about master to slaveholder, but I think the word that's objected to is slave, isn't it? Not slavery as such.
It's the idea of escaping, because it's like this, the idea that someone is a fugitive from a condition that was legal but is not. Just because it was legal doesn't make it right. So maybe that could be, you know, maybe my suggestion is not the right one, but there is a push from this idea of people who were seeking as fugitives.
I understand that in the noun form, but not in the in this sense. But
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly. Yeah. So
Okay, so maybe we could say, so the word we want to remove is escaped, right?
yeah.
And master.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could say he sought his freedom or he achieved freedom.
Yeah, I like
or,
that. Yeah.
Okay, achieved freedom. By the way, I did also contact Kalim at the Museum of African American History, and I did send this to him. I haven't had any comment. But. Mary, do you have a contact there that would like to review this other than?
Kamal?
Kamal, I'm sorry.
Dean's his brother, yeah.
Yeah.
They both work in historic preservation. Let's see. You could also, when you forward him maybe this new text, if you want to copy me on it.
To Kamal.
Yeah, to Kamal and just say,
Okay.
Mary, you know, suggest it or.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so could I will investigate and adopt these changes, and I very much appreciated it, the feedback. Could I have a motion then to make, well, just a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Sorry, could you identify yourself?
So moved.
Tom.
Second, Angus.
Okay, and just to clarify, the motion is to, that I'll work with Mary and Kamal to make these changes and forward this to the land bank. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the renaming of Coon Street. We can't allocate a lot of time at this meeting to discussing the substance, but I think everybody is familiar with the petition from the residents of Coon Street, or the majority of the residents of Coon Street, to rename the street. Also familiar with the work that Dr. Kartunen supplied about the origin of the name and the Coon family of Nantucket. It was discussed at the select board, and it seemed that there wasn't I don't think there was a vote. Linda, do you want to give us an update on the status of this quickly?
They did vote. It was unanimous at the select board meeting.
Okay, to change the name. And then the question is what to change it to.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the select board has invited, I mean, I wrote to them and said, would it help if the historical commission weighed in on this, with the caveat that, you know, we're a volunteer commission. So somebody would have to decide that they're going to do additional research on alternative names on a volunteer effort. Libby Gibson, our town manager, was felt that that would be helpful and would welcome it. This is also going to be taken up on October 7th. So I wanted to find out what the commission thought about researching alternative names and providing information. And Linda, please, you're welcome to comment here if you would like our help, or if you prefer not to have our help, or.
I think, you know, the residents that came up with the name Duck Pond Lane, but I think the thought is they'd like some historical name versus we just picked that because there's a duck pond at the end of our street. But I understand that, the select board and probably you as well may want to have some historical name. We're just trying to avoid the name Coon. Captain Charles or somebody mentioned Josephine. There's some woman named Josephine who was a black woman who lived on the street who taught the kids piano. I mean, we're not that, we just want the name Coon. It's just so offensive to us. So we're happy with what you decide as long, preferably there's no Coon in the street name.
Yeah. I think I received a lot of research from Linda Parado, who lives at, I believe, number 3, right? Or is it number 5? Anyway, she's a resident of Coon Street, and she lives in the home where the Grants lived, and Ruth Grant has been an option. There was also a dairy on this street, Whiting's Dairy. So, obviously it's up to the select board to choose a name, but we could certainly offer some information. I see Fran has her hand up. Fran, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. My impression is that although there was concern for renaming the street Ruth Grant Lane because there's a Grant Avenue off the cliff, that there was a positive feeling about renaming the street Ruth Grant Lane because Ruth Grant was a significant person who lived there. Another alternative was to name it for Josephine White Hall, who was not simply some woman. She was a very beloved member of the Nantucket musical community in the 20th century. However, her name is Josephine White Hall, and to name a street Josephine White Hall Street or Lane is rather too much of a mouthful. So I have received a message from a direct descendant of the Coons. There is a gentleman named Levi Coon who lives in Memphis, Tennessee, who got in touch with me and sent some genealogical information demonstrating his descent from the Nantucket Coon family. And he included the following message. He said, "A small note on the street name. Something I think I would say to the homeowners there. It's sad to me that a Union family could be connected years later to derogatory and hateful speech. However, I can understand the perception as a street name doesn't indicate a person, it's just the last name. If anything, having my last name has given me greater compassion for those who see it as hurtful and deal more directly with the pain it creates. I didn't escape bullying in middle school because of it, and that's how I became aware there was a history attached. It also adds a special definition to my anger at those who perverted the word for their own use in order to demean and dehumanize wonderful, powerful, and resilient people for the color of their skin. In all, I would like it to still point to the family who was a part of the early parts of Nantucket and who fought on the side of the Union that aimed to end slavery. But I also understand that it may not be enough to change it to a complete name. If changing it away from our family name can somehow serve even a small part to make a clearer path to racial equality and relations, I'm sure we would be happy to help in whatever way, as would I. Signed, Levi Coon.
Nice of him.
Very nice
Generous.
message. Very nice. Thank you for sharing that, Fran. Angus, did you want to say something?
I think that's just a lovely letter. My first reaction, and it's been reinforced by that letter is that I don't think anyone wants to take away the honoring of the person who lived on the street or the family. And my suggestion is to use one of the family names or something from the family to still honor them without the use of their last name.
So I don't want to get into we don't have time today to talk extensively about what the right thing to do is here, but what I would like to ask the commissioners is, should we do some work on this? And is there anyone, including among our resource advisors, who would like to do work? I mean, we're all going to live with this new street name in perpetuity, so we should make a wise choice that we can all be proud of and that communicates something about our history as a town. So, you know, I put this on the agenda because I think there is a role for us to play. Holly brought it up to me as something there is a role, but I'd like to just go down the group and find out, you know, please tell me if you think we should make a statement on the 7th and if you have time to work on this. So I will start. I'm going to also ask our resource advisors. So we have Marty here. Marty, I know this isn't really your bailiwick, but do you have any comment?
Yeah, hi, thank you. No, I mean, I'm certainly in support of the renaming, and I do like, especially after that wonderful letter, that the name still sort of family.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Is this something you think that NHC should comment on, and do you have any time to help with any work on it?
I do think it's something that the NHC should comment on. I don't necessarily think that it's this group's. I don't think you have to come up with what the next name will be definitively.
Right.
I think you could come up with a couple of suggestions. I think there'll be a lot of suggestions from the community on that meeting on the 7th. I think what would really be helpful for the NHC to do is to point out that Nantucket has changed our street names before.
So many times. I mean, this street was named Independence Street before it became Coon Street, and so many other streets. And that's exactly what I was thinking as well,
Yeah.
Mary.
Yeah, and for instance, you know, the old mill, or one of the streets, I'm trying to find out exactly where it was. There was a street called Cooper Street that was then renamed. So I sort of like the idea of naming this new street for an African American, because did we have a Cooper Street that was then, I mean, I don't know if it was Cooper named for Barrelmaker or Cooper named for Arthur Cooper, but it was in that New Guinea area and it had since been changed.
Yeah. Well, there was a cooperage on Vestal Street, and Vestal Street was called Prison Street. So
Right.
Thank you, Mary. In the interest of time, I'm just going to keep moving because we really want to save as much time as possible for the discussion of the other work. But I hear you say that you think we should weigh in and that we should recognize we're not the only voice and provide information about individuals, but also about the history of street naming.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Angus?
I agree. I think we should weigh in, but I'm not sure how much we, really need to devote our time to actually the naming suggestion.
Okay, Georgia?
I agree. I don't think we need to weigh in on the naming suggestion.
Okay. And Betsy?
I'm happy to come up with a few names to suggest if that would be helpful.
That would be great. Okay, I'll follow up with you, Betsy.
Okay.
Mickey?
I think that all sounds good. I'm in favor of doing some research if Betsy's willing to spend the time.
Okay. Tom? Tom?
He may be inadvertently muted.
You're still
Tom, you're
muted,
muted.
Tom.
No?
Okay,
Sorry.
now we can hear you.
Yeah, I agree with Angus. I don't think we should spend a lot of time on it, but if we want to make a comment at the select board meeting,
Okay. What other members of Clement?
Yeah, hi, I agree. I like the idea of naming it after someone in the community or on the street, just reflecting the neighborhood of the historic significance of the neighborhood. And I love it that Betsy will look into that.
Great. David?
Yeah, I think I agree with everyone.
Okay.
I have a little bit of time this week if Betsy needs any assistance.
Oh, that would be great. Okay. Georgia?
I said I agreed before. I really like the idea of
Oh,
keeping
sorry.
the historical element rather than relating it to a duck pond. We have enough streets named after duck ponds and other natural features that don't have anything to do with our history.
Okay, terrific. All right, so I think we have a sense of the group. I would like to move on unless anyone has any kind of burning issue that they want to air on this topic. I see Fran has her hand up.
I just wanted to correct something. You've been told that the street was once named Independence Street or Independence Lane, but I've done some research and that's simply mistaken. The street did not exist in 1834, but by 1858, it did exist and had the name. And it didn't previously have any other name but Coon Street.
You know, I'm wondering, I think I'm thinking of a map that is in Barbara White's book. Is that a different street? Okay. Because also,
Once I was told that, I had a really good look and I determined that Independence Lane has always been where it is and that Coon Street was opened and named between 1834 and 1858, and the only name it ever had was Coon.
okay. All right, so thank you, Fran. What I am gonna suggest is that we've had Betsy, David, of course, Fran has done a lot of work on this already, have all said that they would be interested in working a little bit on this, and I'm gonna get folks together on email and come up with some direction, and we can mention it on at our next meeting, just to keep it moving along. Okay. All right, so now let's move to our historic goals for streets. Holly, could you let me share my screen? I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you. Okay, so can you guys all see this PowerPoint?
Yep.
Got it? Yeah? Okay.
Yep.
So we've been working on historicals for streets for a year. We now also have, we have the very preliminary draft of our preservation engineering report. And we will have that in final draft by Wednesday. I promised it. I've shared the preliminary draft, but it's really not for broad consumption. So I should note that it wasn't posted in the meeting materials. If anybody in the public who wants to see it, I'd be happy to provide it, but we will have a final draft available on Wednesday. So I think what I've done is taken the draft goals that we've worked on a lot, like I said, for over a year, and put them in a different framework that I'm hoping we can present, we will present on this Friday at 10 o'clock to the DPW. And I really didn't want to make any kind of a presentation without getting the input from everyone on the commission. So I'm going to run through this really quickly, and then I want to have a discussion about and hear what you all think. So what I've done, just by way of background, is backed off on making any like specific comment about, you know, do this, don't do that, but instead lead with a framework that is taken from the tried and true framework that's specified by the Department of the Interior for preservation and has worked on Nantucket for a very long time. And I'll tell you what I really like about this and what I think works, and you guys can tell me if you agree. So what this says is that, you know, what we know and love about our town is here because of the determination of specific people who worked most actively from the 1930s to the 1980s. And if you think about how preservation has been achieved on Nantucket, it's not always had the same path. So we've had examples of preservation where something that exists has been maintained through maintenance and repair. We've had examples of restoration where unsympathetic alterations have been removed and the way a building looked at a specific time has been re-expressed. We have had some examples of buildings being rehabilitated so that their use can be extended and used in new ways. And then in some cases, lost buildings have been reconstructed. And these four terms are all standards of treatment. And what I'm proposing is that as a first step, our town and the DPW needs to decide with any historic pavement, what standard of treatment are we selecting for this area? And then the decisions about how the design is achieved and implemented will flow from there. This is about these standards. I'm not going to read it. You can read it. But this is this rubric where I try to explain to folks, I mean, many people on the call will be very familiar with this, but the idea of what is preservation, how is it different from rehabilitation, how is it different from restoration, and how is that different from reconstruction? And some specific examples. So preservation is specifically sustaining the existing form of a structure where you are repairing and maintaining the resource rather than extensive replacement or new construction. So for instance, if you had a building and a porch was put on it at a certain time, and it's, you know, it's a federal building and it has a Victorian porch, if you're pursuing preservation, you're not going to remove the Victorian porch. I think an example of this is the Pacific Club. I'm sure Fran will correct me if I'm not aware of some extensive change to the Pacific Club, which was then restored. But certainly at this point, the Pacific Club is being preserved. So there's some very interesting painting on the third floor of the Pacific Club. The building is underframed, so you can't actually go up there unless you know, have one person who will take you up there. It's not open to the public, but it's there. It was discovered when the paint was peeled off, and they needed to put some wallboard up over it, but it's there. There's wallboard over it. It will continue to be there. It's going to be preserved. The building has been carefully repointed, etc. So this is an example of preservation. Rehabilitation is when you have a compatible reuse of a historic resources through repair, alterations, and additions. And it's because you want to use it in a new way. So there's a lot of this on Nantucket. It's a very common treatment for a living town. You know, Nantucket is not a museum. The example that I've chosen is the Athenaeum because it needed to be expanded and have a children's library added. And they did it in such a way that I think is really complementary and appropriate. They've made it handicap accessible, etc. Restoration would be when you're actually saying, all right, we want to take this back to how it appeared at a particular time by preserving the features. And so you're going to choose a period in time, like, so the example I gave earlier of the federal building with the Victorian porch, you would remove the Victorian porch if you wanted to express it. There are a lot of examples of this, like for instance, the Jethro Coffin House had this wraparound Victorian dining porch when it was the hotel, the Ocean House, and that was removed. A lot of this was done over time. And then you have reconstruction where you know a lot about what a a building look like, or a building that's not there, what a landscape look like, but it's just not there anymore. And you know enough about what it looked like because you have enough documents that you can actually recreate it. So an example of this would be Great Point Light, which the second Great Point Light was swept away in 1986, and it was rebuilt to look the way it used to, with some adaptations like solar panels. Any comments on, well, you know what, let's save the comments till the end. So this is some example. I don't know if this should stay in the final presentation, but this is an example. These are drawings from 1939. This is the building that is now Ralph Lauren, the other building which is now Blue Beetle. And you can see how in the early 30s, these buildings had been adapted with these modern windows and these two doors. And then this building, this Blue Beetle, it had this door cut into the corner. And the motivation to preserve the old town and the old buildings was such that in 1939, they actually reversed all of that. So this building that's Blue Beetle, you can see that would be a rehabilitation because they turned it from a warehouse into a shop. And then this building that is now Ralph Lauren, there's there are photographs of how the windows were and the door was, and they put it back that way in 1939. So that would be a restoration. Here's just another picture of the building that is now Ralph Lauren, and how it had these big plate glass windows, which was of great concern to people in the 30s. So we can see, we have the ability to identify changes to our pavement more recently in terms of these 4 treatments. So portions of India Street, South Water Street, Lower Main Street, Straight Wharf, these are examples of a restoration. I actually don't know how far the cobbles extended onto Straight Wharf, so that actually might just be kind of a new construction or new cobbling without precedent, but certainly India Street, portions of South Water Street were all, had been cobbled, and the cobble had been put with bituminous concrete over it. So they were returned to cobblestone in the late 1980s as part of this movement to make the town look more historic and restore the town. The crosswalks across Main Street. So I'm talking about the crosswalks with the flagstones with the bricks in the middle. These are examples of rehabilitation where there were crosswalks with these flagstones, and they wanted a wider, safer area for pedestrians. So they put bricks in between them, and they look great and compatible with their historic use and the setting. The original material was retained, the new material was up, so that would be a successful rehabilitation. And I would say the new crosswalks at 0 Main Street are an undesirable rehabilitation because it wasn't done with sensitivity to retaining the historic material or the form, keeping the historic forms. So more recently, we have sidewalks along Washington Street. Now they didn't change those sidewalks weren't particularly old. They didn't change the shape of them, but they lifted everything up. They put in a new foundation. They flattened them, adjusted the slopes. So I would call that a rehabilitation, and then, you know, reconstructed where it was not there, or there was concrete in some places, which I'll get to later. So using this framework, we would suggest that, you know, the first step is select the appropriate standard of treatment for the setting in need, specify the work to be consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for preservation, align the specifications with technical guidelines that are developed in a preservation engineering study, which would be something for the DPW to do, execute the work to meet the needs, and enjoy the civic pride of protecting an authentic historic town. So then I go into more detail about how would you select which treatment is appropriate. So I would argue that preservation was the right treatment for the sidewalk on Judith Chase Lane. Of course, it has been rehabilitated already, but you know, I'm sure we focus on that one because it was a popular conversation. I'm sure we could choose many, many other sidewalks that are in good passable condition that really don't need to be touched. They should just be repaired when stuff is loose. Restoration is appropriate where we have important historic streets and walks that meet their current use in terms of the layout, but they're really in bad condition. So we can't just maintain them, we actually have to restore them. Rehabilitation is appropriate for historic sidewalks and streets that require some kind of adaptation to meet the current community needs, such as accessibility or meeting the transportation volume of crowds. And rehabilitation is not renovation. So I think what you could say that happened over down by the Pacific Club would be a renovation or an inappropriate reconstruction. Rehabilitation rather. And reconstruction would be when we have a historic walkway or street that used to be there with period materials, but it's been paved over or removed, and we desire a return, and we actually know what was there. If we build new streets and sidewalks in the style of old ones, that might be fine, but it's not a historic reconstruction. It's just a copy or new construction. And there was a lot of this. So revivalist building was a hallmark of the Beinecke period. So it's not bad. It's just, let's not confuse it with reconstructing something that we know was there. So then this presentation goes into what exactly is preservation and what are the guidelines and how would you apply it to streets. And I think this framework, if you decide this sidewalk is going to be preserved, it gives you a lot of guidance about what you will and won't do to that sidewalk. If you decide this sidewalk is going to be restored, and I would say, that corridor along Upper Main Street is actually a candidate for restoration because we don't need to do widening there. We just need to get it flat and safe. And I would think you'd probably pick a period of when we knew that road had evolved and was in very good condition, which would be the mid 70s. And there are other cobblestone streets like Stone Alley that could be a candidate for restoration. And I think it's also important to tell the DPW and the public that it's okay for these sidewalks to be flat. I mean, they should be flat. We don't want the stones all akimbo. That's not how they were when they were built and when they were maintained in good condition. Once it's been restored, we would move into a preservation mode. Many of the sidewalks are going to be candidates for rehabilitation, which is the compatible reuse of historically substitute repair, alterations, and additions. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but there is this philosophy which I think our DPW has started to embrace, which is, you're not going to just be removing something because you don't understand it or it doesn't look right to you. You're not going to be removing material to create a false sense of, you're not going to install material to create a false sense of history. You're going to repair rather than replace. And I think there's a conversation to have around concrete here, but I'll get into that too. So rehabilitation is not renovation. It does allow for widening the sidewalks as long as the standards are followed. A new design should be reviewed by the Historical Commission, the HCC. There are some particular concerns that'll be challenges our DPW will have to resolve. Like if you have to adjust the cross slope of a walk, it often means lifting the walk, and then does it become to require a deeper curb that's deeper than the original curb? Well, certainly a top priority is keeping all the historic material in the street. And about the concrete, I think if concrete is in good repair and functioning, it probably should be retained. I mean, concrete was a preferred building material for curbs. And unless it's deteriorating, I don't know why we wouldn't want to show that. I mean, that's certainly the idea of preservation, is that a building or an object or sidewalk is a record of time. It's an object that evolved over time. And we want to honor and acknowledge all of these features, unless we're doing preservation and picking a certain point, and we knew that there was something other than concrete. I mean, I think probably what was there and not concrete was probably dirt, because if there had been stones there, they would still be there.
Madam Chair, I just want to
yes.
mention we got 15 minutes.
Okay. So a couple other points about ADA, a couple other points about restoration, some points about developing specifications, and then some specific feedback about the downtown sidewalks. So Angus, Mickey, and I spoke about this, and we thought it would be appropriate to give some specific feedback to the DPW about not having these modern shapes. But the widening, you know, they're calling for widening along Steamboat Wharf, the road to Steamboat Wharf, and that's probably fine. So that's it. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And I just wonder what you all think about this, other than that it's too long. Holly, do you want to give us some comments?
Well, I mean, I think it's good that you've outlined the Secretary of the Interior standards. I mean, that's you know, preservation 101. But I'm just curious on how this is going to incorporate Matthew's recommendations, because essentially that's what DPW really is going to be looking at as well.
Okay, David?
Yeah, kind of just going off of what Holly just said, I'm curious, you know, if there's more to it than just the Secretary of the Interior's preservation plans.
Mm-hmm. I want to hear from everyone. And Nikki? Nikki, did you have anything you want to say?
I'll wave my hand at you, Hillary.
Oh, okay. And Georgia?
I agree with David said. I like this as being backup to the Bronski report. I think DPW is going to be totally focused on what can they do in the real world. And this is something that will give them backup if anybody should say, any other element of town or wherever should say, well, why are you building it that way? And why don't you just do something easier and put out an RFP with, you know, a provider that we know, or a builder that we know, to just redo these sidewalks this way. He can say, well, we've got this report and we have this backup that says this is the way a historic town should operate. In other words, I don't think we can overwhelm that department with this, but I think it's extremely useful for the select board to have this as their own sort of backbone.
Tom?
We know how the town, whether it be the select board or the DPW, feels about how we feel about the job they did down around the Pacific Club.
Yeah, I think they have broadly admitted that that was a mistake.
Is there any plans on redoing that?
You know, I included in the presentation that I think it's a candidate for reconstruction, and I'm pretty sure there are no actual plans to do that. But I don't think people think it's impossible. I can address the integration of the two reports, but is there anybody else who wanted to comment just on the idea of having historic goals that make the point that you need to decide what approach you're taking with any particular property or area? You have to decide what approach you're taking, and then you have to sign up to a set of standards that you're going to follow when you design, when you create a new design. Angus.
I think this is a great outline, especially for the layman. So like, you know, the select board or anyone else who's looking at this, to be able to have these categories that are clearly spelled out, and all that, you know, can get really into the specifics through the report. But I feel like this is a great point of departure and a reference of designating what's appropriate in particular areas. I like how this is written.
Mickey, did you want to, or sorry, Marty, did you want to make a comment?
Well, I think that I just wanted to say with our documentation project, which will be beginning the first week in November, I'll be on island more or less that month with researchers. Just everyone. So we'll be doing a pretty comprehensive inventory and survey of the remaining historic fabric of the streets. And I think that we can, by spring at least, from the University of Florida Preservation Institute in Nantucket, working with you, Holly, this group, we could make like preliminary recommendations for consideration on the different approaches for different streets,
Mm-hmm.
as once we have a good record of what exists.
Yeah. And that's why I felt it was important to just emphasize a framework that if you don't make a decision about what your goal is for this area, it's going to be really easy to default to just, well, we're just going to lift everything up and we're going to put everything back down. And to recognize that there's some areas where that's really not appropriate because we want to preserve it the way it is. And there are other areas where actually we really need it to be different if we're going to keep using it. So we need to rehabilitate it. And there are other areas where, you know, we really want this to be as authentic as possible for a certain period that we've identified. And that is a restoration. Holly, to answer your question, I mean, Rob was pretty clear that he wanted the preservation engineering study for his information to develop specifications, but he did not want the historical commission to tell him what the specifications were. So I have made, in being responsive to that, but also feeling like, you know what, that makes sense. Like, we're not in the specification business. We are in the history business, the understanding about preservation business, and the, you know, the setting of historic goals for our town. And I really agreed with Rob when he said, you know, we want to know what your goals are. And so then for us to move into, the goal for this area is preservation. The goal for this area is restoration. That will, if we're all on the same page with the language and the definition, and then if we've also provided Rob with the information he needs to understand the materials, both through the work Marty's doing and the preservation engineering study, about which is so rich and filled with knowledge about things that we were only speculating about, then he really should be able to identify a goal for the area, identify the materials that are present, and come up with a specification and a design that is appropriate for the different goals. So I do think there will be more, I think this needs to get a lot shorter. What I'm hearing from everybody is this framework is helpful. Getting everybody to use the same language and knowing what we talked about when we use this language. I mean, over a year and a half ago, it was like, oh, we're going to reconstruct the street. Oh, we're going to renovate the street. You know, oh, it's a restoration. It's like, this language was just whatever sounded right to people was what people were saying, and it didn't mean anything. So I think it's a big,
You're correct, Hillary. That is very, very, very smart to do that. But I also just want to, you know, this isn't something new either. The Secretary of the Interior standards are outlined and referenced within building with Nantucket in mind. So it is something that has been the backbone of preservation on, you know, in general, but on Nantucket. So I think that is good to be able to focus it into this. Yes.
And we don't want to do something new. We want to do something that's like proven. So I think the fact that it's not new, that it's universally accepted, but that it hadn't been something that had been being used for streets makes it even more important to be bringing people back to this. So I don't think this is something we need to take a vote on, but I'm also, well, I think what I'm going to do based on the feedback is condense it. We're going to get the final report from Matthew and put it together, and but continue to work on the idea of step one is, settling on an approach and everybody understanding when you pick an approach, what that really means, and letting that guide the plan.
When do we expect a final draft from Matthew?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Sounds good.
Okay, so Holly, can you let me know, why is it that we had to have a hard stop at 11?
Because I already have a meeting. I'm actually going to be on the Coastal Resiliency Advisory meeting with a debrief on this past week.
And is it possible for us to use the Zoom room to continue any discussion, even if you're not present, but could you just make me the host?
I don't have the capabilities to provide that to you. That would be a question you'd have to have with town admin. All staff handle that, so.
Do you technologically, you can make someone a co-host, right?
Yes, but again, this is a town committee account. It's not my personal account.
Right, okay. So everyone, we are going to be meeting on Friday at 10. I've also had confirmation from Dawn, who's not able to attend this meeting or the next, that she's able to meet with us October 2nd. And that could be a meeting where we could discuss the mission statement, because as you know, we now have no mission on our website. Town administration removed it. So I'd like to get that cleared up and get everybody set. So could you all please put down on your calendar October 2nd at 10 as a next meeting?
I will not
Tom,
be here.
you won't be here. Okay. Do we have other people? Well, I can do this by email as far as organizing, making sure that we have a quorum for that meeting. And I guess we're looking at the point where we need to wrap up. So does anyone have anything else that they wanted to say about any of this? All right, seeing no comment, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Sorry, who is that? Clement?
Clement, I second.
Okay, thank you. All right, all in favor. Tom, were you in favor of your motion? Clement's in favor. David?
Yes.
Aye.
Georgia?
Aye.
Angus?
Aye.
And I am in favor. So we are adjourned, and I will continue to work on this and see you all on Friday the 25th.
Thank you, Hillary.
Okay.
Thank you, Hillary.
all.
All right.
Thanks.
Friday.
Bye-bye.